Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. So, today we're going to talk about how to build a city that we trust. My name is Shadir Zai. I'm one of the co-founders and the CTO of Ngoka. We are an IoT security startup, a graduate of the Innovation Center for the National Cybersecurity. And here today I have an amazing panel. Wealth of knowledge and experience. We're going to try to cover a lot of areas about smart cities and how we can trust it. So bear with us. Feel free to prepare your questions. I'll do my best to leave around 10 minutes, 15 minutes at the end to get questions. And I would love to have an engagement with the audience as much as possible on that one. So we all know that smart cities, it's happening. We all are depending on IoT, on our smart meters, on our smartphones, on our smart devices at homes to control our life and ease our life. And with technologies and the rapid changes or the adoption of 5G, that is becoming much more possible across different industries. We have now autonomous vehicles, we have drones deliveries, we have connected health, and all of these are possible. However, at the same time, they bring a lot of complex of challenges and risks that we're not aware from it. From data privacy, but also those risks on cyber from privacy or attacks on the infrastructure, they have also an impact on people's safety. So it's a double jeopardy type of things that you would have. An example of that, which had happened as a use case, people hacking a pacemaker for someone as a high wealth individuals with a ransomware and hold them for a ransom for that one. Another example is a state agent, a state actor that actually controlled the number of the smart infrastructure for a city in Europe. And they managed to manipulate the process of that smart city. So in other words, they actually turned all the boilers in part of the city, which let some of them explode. Those things are quite critical, and they can impact our life. Last one was a simulation that happened last year in New York City where the Pentagon and the Secret Service, that they run a demonstrator of an autonomous vehicle, that they managed to lock the city with a jam that you cannot unlock it, and it takes them around 3 days to unlock that jam if they have used autonomous vehicles or autonomous taxis. And those are the type of things that are interesting, that scares us. You know, there's a great initiatives that is coming in, but how much we trust that technology, that it's communicating on its own without any human interaction. And this is what we are hoping here with our panelists to try to cover on it and discuss it from different facets, from a government side, from the industry side, from the insurance side, and from the legal side. Without any further ado, I'll try my best to shut up today. I'm just here a facilitator, and I'll let my panel to introduce themselves, starting from my right. Joe, go ahead.
Thank you, Shadi. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Joe Dolan, I head up the Northern Ireland Cybersecurity Centre. We provide advice and guidance out across all sectors in terms of good cybersecurity practice, from the largest businesses right through to Joe and Jane blogs on the street. Our aim is really to try and improve cybersecurity right across the province. And we re-amplify an awful lot of what the National Cybersecurity Centre do in the UK. So this is a very hot topic. You know, what is a city? Who owns the city risk? And I suppose a couple of key challenges that we would see going forward is the whole governance piece. You know, we know streetlights are owned by a particular part of government, roads are owned by a different part. What about your parking attendants? What about if we start to move into autonomous vehicles and new services? How does that governance all come together, and who owns the overall risk around of that, and who determines what that risk level might be? So these are challenges that we're currently struggling with. And then there's also, sorry, I'm going on here, let the panel introduce themselves.
Cool. Thanks, Joe. Paul, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, thanks, guys. Paul Eastwood. I'm a solicitor in the Contracts and Technology Department in Tunes, law firm here in Belfast. I suppose most of my interaction with data protection and privacy, and that is dealing with clients at all levels of their journey, both the startups right through to the multinationals, advising them on what they need to be thinking about now and also with an eye on the future, making sure that they're laying the right foundations so that they can avoid catastrophe but also push on, give themselves a good grounding that they can sell to their employees to make them come and work for them, and also to their customers, and that their product is everything that needs to be at the moment and for future investment as well.
Great, thanks, Peter.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Peter McToole. I'm digital lead in the NITC, the Northern Ireland Technology Centre, which is part of Queen's University in Belfast. So, our kind of main reason for being in terms of this space is really twofold. Firstly, it's to help to understand the challenges that there are in the manufacturing space and some other sectors as well within Northern Ireland in the adoption of industrial digitalisation technology. So basically not just kind of the vertical side of the company, but also the horizontal, going across company systems and so on. And cybersecurity is coming out top in most of the surveys that we do in that space. And then the second reason we exist is to help to signpost and roadmap ways that we can drive industry forward, to understand the challenges they have right now, and then implement solutions within our own facility, right, which is the NITC right now, soon to be the AMIC facility, which is something that's been funded under City Deal money with Queen's University and Belfast, and Ulster University. So yeah, it's to help to solve those challenges, and we're looking at implementing some cyber security solutions and slightly and more novel ways to help to make the adoption of it easier, because it's one of the biggest problems with the adoption of what we're seeing in industry today is it's a lack of understanding of how you would manage the cyber side of things. It's something different to what conventional company organisations are used to. So we're just trying to help out in that space as well. So, yep, free to have a conversation after if anybody's interested. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks, Peter. Hugh?
Thank you. So my name is Hugh Kirk. I work in a company called Allstate, US-based, but we're a global organisation. I specialise in two areas: governance, risk and compliance, and product security. So what we build, how we secure it. So I want to kind of couch the conversation from my lens today. When I think about 5G and IoT, I think of three things that I'm really excited about. The first one is enhanced broadband speed, number one. Everything's going to move a lot faster. That alone is going to be a success in my house. I've got 3 kids. Everything goes digitally. So having quicker, faster mobile connectivity, number one. Number 2 is latency. Okay, so there's a concept called ultra reliable low latency communications, meaning that we're not going to have packet drops. This is the whole concept of edge computing, and to be able to have faster, more or higher fidelity communications. Okay, so that means things like virtual reality, augmented reality is going to be a realistic capability we can have right across our city. And the third one is what they call massive machine type communication. So what does that mean? That means the ability to have about 200,000 IoT devices in 1 square mile. 200,000 devices, ability to communicate, network, and share data. Huge. Okay, so the propensity and opportunity for that is absolutely unprecedented. Estimated about $12 trillion is going to add to the economy. So that's all the positives. So the key thing for us as a business is how do we integrate securely into that? How do we understand the challenges and get early into the design and architecture? So.
Great, and I love that point that you've raised. Those are the good things, but as we know in life, it's not always nice and pink and rainbows and unicorns all the time. It is both sides. So those advances also bring challenges. And a question to the panel: what are the top 3 challenges from a cybersecurity side that you have seen 5G and IoT are struggling with, or they are bringing to the table in order to enjoy those type of stuff? And if you want, you can go ahead.
The first one is, like, I'll go back to the volumetrics. Okay, so meaning just the number of devices that are out there. I think today there's about 8.5 billion devices. Reckoning by 2030, we could be about 25 to 30 billion devices. So having those patch managed, okay, so in security, one of our 101 is patch management, making sure, like when you're out on your phone, you got the latest patches, security vulnerabilities. When you've got 8, 10, 15, 20 billion devices out there, you have to have a real automated process to patch manage these things. And also you need the ability to be able to risk profile something. So how do we understand what's secure, what's not secure? So that's number one. Data security, number two. The volumetrics of data is going to be unprecedented. Okay, so that's going to be my data, it's going to be these guys' data, it's going to be your data. How do we protect it from a privacy perspective? Who's got the right to access it, where it is it secured, as well as the security perspective, which is the confidentiality, integrity, availability. 4G has got a, I'm not going to say insecure, but the encryption capability needs to be uplifted, and that's what's been inherited in 5G. So number one, encrypting your data at source allows a lot of control afterwards, or mitigation. So for me, patch management of those devices, edge computing has distributed security responsibility and data. That's the challenges I'd like to see built in.
Brilliant, brilliant. Peter?
I think the main challenges that we see in the cyber side of things is it boils down to legacy, both legacy assets and legacy mindsets, if you like. So basically, and if we're looking at moving forward in this, certainly in the manufacturing industry at least, we can't just look at from this point on. So kind of greenfield installations, we have to look at what currently exists, because realistically that's where we're going to get the real bang for your buck in terms of gaining access to this data and so on. So the legacy side of it, in terms of the assets, from what we are seeing, are most assets are set up to be standalone. That's the way they are. If they're not specifically IoT developed, they're standalone, and that means that they traditionally can be quite difficult to connect, either technically or in terms of cost, because you only have to do massive software upgrades in order to make it happen, or you have to put certain executable files in, and ultimately it can be cost prohibitive to do that. So that's from the asset side of it. From the cultural side of it, the legacy cultural side of it, that can split that into two main areas. One is organizational, and one is the people side. From the organizational side, certainly within the manufacturing piece, what we're seeing is the traditional organizational structures is set up that the IT deals with all stuff IT, databases, reports, and so on. The manufacturing side of things deal with all things manufacturing, and there's a bit of a link because one has to help the other. But realistically, in order for this to be properly adopted and properly embedded securely into the industry, is they have to merge together much more than they have done in the past. And people have to straddle both camps and be able to speak fluent IT and fluent OT so as to be able to drive this forward. So that's the first thing from the org structure side of thing. And the second, and maybe the more emotive one, is the actual people culture in terms of change. It's a mindset change that's coming about gradually as the generations go through. We'll see, because my 5-year-old kid can an iPad this morning, he's able to operate it better than I am, and it's inbuilt, it's inbred. Whereas and with the legacy people within organisations, they don't see the value in connecting their data. People who sit in shop floor, they don't see the value in going through this hassle, which means that they're going to have to go through an extra few steps for the first 5 or 6 times for the greater gain of the company. So it's an education and culture thing, and that's the main problem we see with the cyber side of things. The final one is network layer security versus asset security. So if we're talking about the IoT side and the way that companies their preferable method of adoption tends to be a hybrid style approach. So rather than going all full cloud to gain access to all of the bells and whistles you can get from the advanced analytics and so on, there's the option to do a lot of that stuff, but if you can Dockerize it and push it to the edge and bring it down to the on-prem side of things, which is the favorable method, then you've introduced another problem, because then you've introduced security at the level beneath. It's used to being implemented. So you've got these assets which are effectively unsecured, which is where the embedded trust side of things, so making the asset trustable, making the asset and its alias that can't be fooled. That's one of the next challenges as well that we see, and it's getting that mindset change across to kind of help industry forward. Sorry, Sally, I went on far too long.
No, but that's good. You gave me a lot of good points there. Paul, from your side?
Yeah, really following on from Peter's excellent point about trust is what I'm saying is the most important issue. Not so much just so sort of technical, but getting the buy-in from individuals to use it, I think, is probably absolutely key to drive this forward. The issue is that people are wary, generally, about giving their data. You've seen how many people refuse to download the track and trace app or take a vaccine or whatever for whatever reason. So you need to get trust bought in at the very ground level, and I think that is actually, it's not often you'll hear a lawyer actually say that a law is good, but if we're looking at data protection, certainly one of the principles of that is the transparency requirement, making sure that policies are in place, procedures are in place, so that individuals know exactly how their data is going to be used is absolutely key. And then as you go through the sort of life cycle of the data as well, knowing who holds on to that data, where it is, why are they using it, what can you ask them to do with it as well, and can they delete it whenever they need to, and all that is absolutely required under GDPR. I fear that lip service is paid to that sometimes whenever people are setting up their sort of supply chain and their own ecosystem of, well, sure, I've got a contract in place, I don't need to do any more due diligence on what sort of security people are applying to anything. So it's all that good stuff that just builds in trust, allows buy-in from individuals and from the wider ecosystem.
Brilliant, thanks. And Joe, going back to you, and this is more tricky from your side as the Cybersecurity Centre here in Northern Ireland, what are those challenges that you see more?
I think there's a lot of good points already picked up here. I think, first of all, with 5G and IoT, great opportunities. And I think one of the challenges is with any new leap of technology, we don't know where that's going to take us. Even if we look back in terms of where we moved from broadband early days to now, 4G, 3G, 4G, the disruptive services and technologies that have come on board as a result of that, we can only imagine what 5G and the emergence already of IoT devices are going to be bringing, and how that changes people's behaviours, how they consume and how they want services, especially public services, delivered. So I come back to my original point around governance. Who owns all of this? There's a lot of players. We're no longer in a space where it's one organisation, even if that's international or global. We're now dealing with a city, people's lives, well-being, how they move around, how they want to live their lives and how they want to work. So what does that really mean? So underpinning all of that is this whole idea of integrity and trust. How do we identify who is actually consuming these services? How do we provide that openness and transparency to the individual? Not to mention the machine-to-machine type communications that we're going to see as well. And I think it was Hugh touched on, there is going to be fantastic amounts of data. Good things and bad things about that. One, it helps us shape how we make decisions in government and in industry about providing services in and around the cities that we have. But it also brings that scale and that volume. How do we actually harness that and protect it for the individuals and for the services that we protect? So that integrity piece and the identity piece is very important as well. And I think running all the way through all of this is balance. Because what we do want to have is innovation. We want people to pick this stuff up, adapt it, get people to use it. But at the same time, we want to have some control over it. legislation, regulation, these are good things, but it can also be a stifle to innovation. So how do we create that balance around good governance and oversight, ownership, legal ownership? There's a lot of players. How do we also then understand where demarcations of services lie? How do we introduce that trust? I think it was Paul or Peter was talking about, right to the IoT level. And we're seeing already a legacy there, whereas a lot of devices in play that don't have that embedded trust already in there. So how do we clear that up and ensure that whatever we're procuring or doing now has trust in it, and there's standards and legislation coming through the EU to help sort of stimulate that sort of thing. If you're as old as me, you'll remember things like the kite mark, which kind of give you an idea that something has been tested. So something like that in around buying an IT device. How do we change people's buying behaviour? Security becomes an important factor. In the same way, if you buy a car now, if it didn't have seat belts, you wouldn't take it. If an IoT device doesn't have the ability to change the authentication method or receive patches or updates or have a support mechanism in around it, then that's something maybe you're not getting a level of security that you need. So we need to understand all of this landscape and how we can move forward, keeping that balance. So
and that's a great point. And I've already have listed around 24 points to discuss, so I'm not sure we will be able to cover them all. But one point going back to what you said, as well as Peter mentioned it, and all of you and Hugh and Paul, it's the trust element and how we build that trust. Now, here's a question, and you touch on the point. This is a rapid change in technology. The behavior of people is changing, and I think the pandemic is a great example. Video chatting and being able to use it, not just FaceTime. There's 120 apps that came out during the pandemic to allow the younger generation to talk with each other. And those are cameras into your homes, getting data, privacy issues, but also they lead towards security issues if they got manipulated. So that change in behavior, is the security industry using the same principles that we have from 20, 30 years on such a new environment? Peter, you highlighted into industrial and manufacturing, assets, cells, they used to be standalone, they're not connected to anything. You build your walls as high as you can so no one will compromise it. Now we're telling them, no, knock that wall, connect it to a wireless router. Anyone in the world can access it if you haven't set it up right. What do we need to do to be able to overcome these challenges? Do we need to stay as we are and continue, or is there a need for a fundamental change in our thinking? And I'll start with you, Joe, because I know, and I work with you, and I work also with the NCSC, and I know there are a number of guidelines that has been put in place, but I'm interested to hear your view as well as the government perspective on that one.
Yeah, I think the challenge is technology tends to move a lot quicker than we can understand the risks in and around what that technology is going to bring, and how then we put the likes of standards and legislation in around that. And normally we find the industry drives those standards and are actually quite more nimble than government or our legislature would be. So I think that's going to be a big challenge going forward, because in the absence of those, we then end up going back to where we were in the old days, where we had a lot of proprietary systems that then was very difficult to integrate and communicate with. So we need to at least set that bedrock out as to here are the fundamentals that we need to be sort of designing to, that we need to be creating those trust relationships against, and with an eye on what's happening on the horizon. So quantum computing is only around the corner. We can't use the encryption methods that Hugh talked about, because they've a lifespan that we know, whether that's 5 years or 10 years, they're not going to take us into the next 50 years, of which what we need to be designing towards now. So I think it's how we can be more nimble in around that sort of regulation, specification, standards type arena.
Brilliant, brilliant. And from that, Hugh, going back to you and knowing your experience in security and from an insurance perspective, do you still, the same methods are still possible to help us to patch? or do we need to start thinking in a different way?
Yeah, so the fundamental concepts are the same. We talked about confidentiality, integrity, availability, and trust the data. So the concepts are the same, but we got to look forward and we got to do different. So definitely adoption of things like, we hear it all the time, the buzzword, artificial intelligence, machine learning. We can't have individuals looking at that data, looking at incidents, trying to risk profile something, making sure is that secure. We've got to hand that off. We've got to build systems, and intelligence can do that rapidly. So really, really embracing and adopting AI and machine learning is going to be number one. The other thing that I think we can do the same, but more of, and I'm a big believer of it, is actually educating ourselves. Yeah, educating people around what does it mean, and you know, we kind of get I'm going not to say resilience to it or starting to kind of think less of it, but people are not. I think we're getting a wee bit fatigued about cybersecurity and breaches and data, but actually going back to why is it important? It's your data, it's about you, what can happen with it. I think having that informed knowledge about people is going to be paramount. So we take people on that journey, they know when to sign up, they have the right to understand what is my data, where is it, who's using it. That's really important, and that pushes innovation and businesses to make the right decision. And Joe talked about, you know, building that in. I remember time seatbelts weren't, you didn't have to wear a seatbelt in the car. And that was a small change to say you must make a seatbelt mandatory in the car. You must have a kid in a child seat. That saved thousands of lives. So even small changes that make standardization of building security and privacy into the build of those systems position as well, because we don't know what's going to happen. We've got to embrace this. It's really exciting, but we've got to have some of those foundational changes in people, in the process and regulation Joe talked about, in the technology. Make manufacturers of these devices have security at the start. So you're putting it in, layering in. Peter already chatted about the challenges there. We're going to hit that. We can't build it in afterwards. It must be at the mindset at the start of the foundations.
And Peter, from your perspective with different industries that you are dealing with and the different type of SMEs as well as the bigger organization from the manufacturing side, going to the same principle. And you've touched on it, which is the culture of the organization, which fits exactly with what you have said. How do you see that as possible? Because still cyber is an alien concept to them. And to any business, because they're usually focusing on their day-to-day job. And, you know, I need to make more money, I need to deliver more products, I need to increase the efficiency of it. So how for you within the national, at the center and the potential, the EMIC deal, will help to bring that culture closer?
Yeah, it's something that we're seeing in terms of the culture and are we doing things the same way we've done them for the past 30 years and so on. And one of the main issues, aside from standards, which we've already established, and it's something that Joe picked up on, is the proprietary nature of a lot of the solutions that are available today. So if I am an industry that's slightly bigger than an SME, I could have 30, 40 different types of industrial assets within my environment. I go to try to digitalize them or try to get access to the data, and I usually go to the machine provider, for example. They will give me their point solution. So I'll have a solution for a machine, but I have another 39 to think about, and that solution for that one machine won't fit the other 39. So it's one of the things that we need to see really start to emerge with force in the industry, if adoption is to happen at any real scale, is vendor-neutral solutions providers who are able to go right across the verticals and the horizontals. And it's not something that there has to be a huge step change to make happen. It's just a slight mindset change from the actual solutions providers of today, moving away from proprietary to onwardly available APIs and so on, and exposing the data securely across horizontal stacks. So that's what we are seeing, and it's something that will really help to drive the industry where it implements it.
Brilliant. And on the point that you mentioned regarding regulations and going to the manufacturer to change things, implementing security by design or privacy by default, Now, we know the UK have put the regulations on the baby monitor, for example, that you shouldn't use 4 zeros as a password. You know, that should be out. And they put the guidelines for smart cities. Paul, coming to you as the lawyer in the group on that side, how changes in regulations will be able to allow us to move that culture a little bit? Because I agree with Peter, it's not just the end user, but it's also the supply chain, the provider of these tools. They need to be involved into the process as well.
Yeah, I think that the most important angle for regulation is, as much as possible, to have a consistent approach. Northern Ireland doesn't operate in a vacuum and doesn't go anywhere else. You know, the fact that goods are so movable across borders, we need to be able to say, well, if we're bringing in an IoT device from anywhere else, it will comply with our laws. And the difficulty there is that we're already seeing something of, not necessarily a divergence of principle, but perhaps of pace, that some new laws are coming in GB that haven't made their way onto the statute book in NI. So does that mean that we're falling behind? Probably. Law hates a vacuum, so as much as we can do at the moment is legislate in general ways, but then that leads, as Joe said, to industry shaping the law, which is good, but also exposing themselves potentially of those who are prepared to take a risk, and business is all about taking a risk and capitalizing on it. If they are told later on that they get that wrong, then that stifles it, stifles people wanting to take risk and stifles business as well. So I think in terms of the most sort of productive regulation that can be done is everyone moving at the same, hopefully very quick pace, rather than trying to legislate for every single possible minutiae of detail. Let business be business and build in the safeguards and build in the principles and allow people to react.
Brilliant, and that is a good point. I'm going to turn to the audience just to give you a fair warning. I'm going to ask a quick question to the panelists, but after that I'm depending on you to ask questions and get engaged. And I look forward to that. And do please ask tough questions, no simple questions. Okay, the best questions will win a drone. I'm not joking. Okay, I'll go straight ahead. So we've talked about multiple things about building trust, the need to innovate, the need to build security to allow us to innovate, changing the culture, including the regulator and the guidelines. So all of us, we work in security and we know the challenges that we have. What are the main challenges that we are seeing? Why we cannot do it to that point? What are the things that we need to do within our industry to allow us to catch up and be able to do it? Because we are always 2 foot behind the attackers or organized crime. And I'm not talking about, a 16-year-old kid trying to, impress the girl next door by trying to hack her dad's laptop. And that's a really important area to create a distinguish between, because you hit on it, Hugh, as well as Joe and Peter. The risks that comes here with the technology that we're talking about, it's not just the data, it's our lifestyle, it's us, the safety, which goes back to the seatbelt example. So what do we need to do as a security people, or what are the challenges that we are facing to be able to deliver, that security?
So we all touched on it. My big one for me, I really would love to see better shared forums to take on this as a collective. Sometimes we solve challenges as an individual company or as an individual industry or just as this kind of like conglomerate. We need to have shared spaces, because that's how we're going to be successful on it. How do we learn collectively going forward? How do we adopt that technology in a secure way? How do we influence regulation in there? And how do we share intelligence about some of those security challenges, privacy? Again, my biggest frustration is often we're very myopic in our thought. We've got to think in here. We don't want to share about what we've done wrong, what we didn't do so good. That intelligence sharing, of what issues we're seeing with our data, with our integration connectivity, that open forum in a safe space allows us to really address those challenges holistically. So having that place, because 5G and IoT, it's going to be a global phenomenon. You're going to have government. You're going to have vendor space, Peter talked about. You're going to have legislation. You're going to have individuals. And you need to have that shared space to be able to address those challenges, get them out together so we can collectively use that brain power. Otherwise, we're all solving for our own problems, and that's where I see one of the biggest challenges.
Brilliant. Joe, do you want to?
Totally agree. I think the benefits that we're going to get from this here is whenever we can start to join things up. That's whenever we start to realise the true potential of all of this. And without the ability to be able to share information in a consistent manner, to integrate in a consistent manner, to understand our legislative boundaries, to understand our regulatory boundaries and how they will work, without all of those nuts getting cracked, then we're going to rely on point solutions. We're going to have the 20 or 30 different ICS type systems, all proprietary, and we'll not realise the benefits to you and I as citizens and to the businesses that will grow out of this here. So we do need to crack those, and those are conversations that are ongoing, and I agree with what Hugh's saying. We need to have that shared understanding of how we all move together collectively on a global scale, because this isn't something that just affects Northern Ireland or the UK. It does affect the global economy.
Peter, from your side?
Yeah, I think the main thing, aside the points the guys mentioned, would be non-affiliated, independent advice on how to go about doing this. You know, if you look the way we typically behave, if we're looking at finding solutions nowadays, is that generally we'll start with a Google search or some sort of web search. You know, that's what's going to happen. And so we're at the mercy then of Google Analytics, who is paid the most, and they'll come up in your, the top list or whatever. And you'll always find the biggest names, the biggest players in industry will be there. So you'll start to click on them, and then you'll go and you might call them for some advice. And if you're starting off at a reasonably low baseline in terms of knowledge of how to go about doing this, the first nuggets of information you receive, they're the ones that are implanted. They're the ones that stick with you. So realistically, what we need is industry experts, like the forum that the guys have mentioned and so on, industry experts coming together, non-affiliated, non-biased advice, not pointing towards the most expensive solutions, but rather than the most cost-appropriate solutions to the environment that they're looking at. So a body like that would be very useful going forward.
Great, thanks. Paul, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think following on the sort of forums and engagement, to me, is probably the most important, leading into engaging with the public sector as much as possible, going to the Meet the Buyer events and getting buy-in from them to allow them to then adopt a more agile sort of contracting approach of keeping up with technology rather than being explained how exciting these things are and how great they could be for Belfast, and then they're told, well, we can't do that because we're in a 10-year contract at the moment and we're stuck in the dark age. So changing the mindset there of the purchaser, to me, is probably the easy, or not the easiest, but the best way to drive it forward, because then the market just catches up, really.
Brilliant. I love that point a lot. Now, I gave you a fair warning, so you had around 5 minutes and all of the time before to think of questions. So, any questions from the audience? Yeah, sure. I'll come to you. Just to make sure, because the next one is very loud, so go ahead.
Thanks very much. That was really, really interesting. I think everybody raised a number of great points. I just had a question or maybe a comment, so no drone for me. Around trust, I think there's two types of trust. You have your infrastructure trust, to make sure that a smart city doesn't get hacked and everything shuts down. And then there's consumer trust. And Hugh raised a great point about education, and I think everybody in this building knows what Facebook and Google collect and what they do with that data. But a lot of people outside know, and they don't care, because they get a benefit of something, free services, quicker shopping deals, so on. So I'm just wondering, how do you think that would sort of square with this new infrastructure, whereby will companies or manufacturers really care that much because it's for the consumer's benefit? And obviously it works great for infrastructure to keep everything up and going. And then sort of a second point with regards to legislation. Technology shifts very, very quick. Legislation can take an awful lot of time. And sometimes, by the time a legislation can go through all the processes it has to, the technology's moved on. And can you ever see a chance where they will sort of meet up and sort of run in parallel? Thanks very much.
I'm going to take a shot at that one first.
Go ahead, Hugh.
And it's a great point. And so I'll go into the consumer trust. And you're right. Everybody, it's like we're very quick in terms of what the benefits are. And I'm not like a scaremonger. I don't want it. But I also really believe in decision choice, informed choice. And one of the things, and we'll blow our own trumpet here if that's okay. I got 3 kids under 8, okay? Digitally, really, really smart. Already it's embedded in their work and school. And I'm aware that they're going to be part of this new generation. So I can't stop them, I can't lock them away, and I can't say you can't do that. But we've developed a program called Cybersecurity for Kids, Cyber Safety for Kids. And it's about showing them the 101 of security, what can happen, how you can take the right steps, so at least they are informed and aware going forward. And that's the best thing we can do. If you decide, and that's good for me, I'm cool with that. We're in a democracy. As long as you're aware, we provide that. And I love the work they're doing now. And it's a pain that, you know what, every site I go on to, what's your cookie preferences? That's really important. It's a good step. That's the legislation getting in there. And it's slower. I don't think we'll ever see legislation going. But if we build that mindset and that ability of us to challenge them as consumers, that's what's going to shape industry quicker than legislation, actually. So for me, it's all about giving an informed decision, and that's how we build trust.
Joe?
Yeah, I mean, couldn't agree more. Informed choice, the challenge we have from the centre and from NCSC is making people aware of the risks, not just people, but businesses. And I think people are see the benefits a lot quicker than to see the risks. And it's difficult to see the risks, especially when they're not always clear. And obviously we hear about the scams, totally manipulating people to do stuff that normally they wouldn't do. So it's trying to get that information out in a way that people can then make an absolute informed choice. I was in a conversation once where 2 people behind me were saying, I have a mobile device, I've got it fully encrypted, I've got a VPN on, and the partner who was with them says, I have a laptop and I do nothing because there's nothing on it that I value. So I don't care if it gets hacked, I just use it to Google search. I've no identity on there or anything. So there was an informed choice there, and I think that's very important. In terms of legislation catching up with technology, I think that's a utopia we all dream of. But I think that Hugh made an important point. It's about the people. The people make change happen a lot quicker than any other industry or government. So if people say, this is something we want and demand, it'll happen. If you just look at what happened with the iPhone around security, people said, it's not enough anymore. I carry everything I own on this phone. I need better security. And industry responded and started to create that sort of new standard. So I think it's about people making their voices heard as well, because by doing that, that'll actually help make change a lot quicker and drive legislation or regulation through. So that would be my take on it.
Brilliant. Paul, do you want to add anything, or shall I check if there's any other questions? Yeah, we have one. Sorry.
50-50 here for the drone, all right?
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about cybersecurity, but what about physical security? So the likes of your home with smart locks, people breaking into your app on your phone and being able to access your house. How do you see security in homes and physical security being compromised by a smart city in the future?
If I can take that one and anyone else jump in. Very good point. And actually COVID has shown us that we used to sit in offices, very trusted environments, and COVID with the distributed workforce have driven people out into their homes. So the home's an extension of an office or an industry. And it's a hostile environment, but it actually takes us back to what we're trying to do with smart cities. it is, we're going to ask for public and industry to operate in a hostile environment. No controls, no walls, no windows, nobody seeing who comes in and who goes out. So how do we build that trust inherently in the systems, in the architecture, in the designs, in the standards that we're actually rolling out? Really, really good question. In terms of physical security, if I can make a simulation to the type of environment we're operating in, we all carry our laptops or PCs around, but look at the security in around an ATM, which is effectively a laptop or a PC, and behind it, it's a lot more robust in terms of its physical security. And what if we start to roll out sensors? They will need to have that wrapper in around them to make sure that they're not easily tampered with. They become vulnerable just to the normal wear and tear of individuals in the city life. So it's a really, really good question. It's an area that's often forgot about. And also personnel security, who can access these things? How do we validate that they are the people who they are? So it's another equally important aspect of the security triangle.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Joe, for that. Just to close up, because I've got the signal twice now, that we're running out of time. One nugget, one piece of advice that you can give the audience about building trust with the smart city, what will that be? And I'll start with, in the middle, Paul, Peter, Hugh, and then we end with Joe.
Very quick nugget. Front load the work. I think make sure that you're putting in the time at the beginning of a project, at the beginning of a business, to build in the steps that will allow people to trust engaging with the product and the business.
Brilliant. Peter?
I think the main would be kind of visualization of the end goal and then backward planning from that. So as you choose the right solutions providers, the right systems, the right scalability options, and so on. Thank you.
That's a tough one. So I'm just going to say it's a fantastic opportunity. We embrace it and we ask the right questions. Just think about what's important to us, and we ask those questions. We don't know the answers yet. That's one thing for sure. So you ask the right question, go in with that mindset, open and challenging.
Brilliant. Joe?
This is all built on trust. If we can't give the openness and transparency around this, then people won't adopt it and we won't get the benefits and the opportunities that are there. I think we need to build that in by design, security by design, privacy by design, but also the services that we offer need to be open and transparent. I really would like to see much more empowerment for the citizen and much more that they can start to drive their own services, so that starts inherently to build that trust factor in.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. It was a great conversation. I had a lot of points from it. I would like to ask the audience if we can just thank the panelists in the traditional way. That would be great. Thank you very much. And shamefully enough, if you are interested to see what we do as an NGOCAN, building DNA for devices, for smart devices, based on the device's characteristics, do please come to our stand. We're just opposite the burrito stand. You won't lose us. Very strategic location. And about the drone, do please go. We have a competition. Scan the barcode, put your details, and you have a chance to win a drone. And I wasn't joking about that one. So thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate it.